Hey guys, it's Deli. I want to talk about a topic today that has blown up on Reddit and Twitter over the past couple days. With the introduction of the final shape, we've had a few changes made to the game. One of these changes being how we scale in raids and dungeons, as well as these activities now having surges. Just now, this week's TWID dropped and has addressed this issue, which is ironic because I'm currently writing the script for this video. Regardless, I still want to talk about this subject and the changes Bungie plans to implement. To start off, let's look at the TWID and see what Bungie has to say. Now, I'm just going to read this real quick, and then we're going to go over the numbers that they give us, and I will give my opinions about everything at the end. We have a few raid and dungeon details to share, including some upcoming dates and details on a change we're planning in the near term. Let's jump in. The final shape brought a few changes to the raid and dungeon experience. First, the difficulty tiers and power level caps were reworked, altering the difficulty for many power-enabled activities. At the same time, surges were added to raids, offering a damage boost for certain damage types on a weekly rotation. We've seen a lot of discussion and different numbers provided for how this impacts the raid and dungeon experience, so we want to first give a quick clarification on the net change for incoming and outgoing damage in raids and dungeons in the final shape. So this graph right here is currently what we have. It's what we're dealing with, it's what we're playing with right now. So let's go over the outgoing first. So outgoing, we're 5 under compared to what we were before, which was like 15 or 20 over, something like that. We're outgoing 5 under. In raids, that's a minus 33% damage, and in dungeons, it's only plus 2%, so really no change in dungeon damage. Now, outgoing plus surge is minus 15% in raids and plus 28% in dungeons. So, to explain that, if you are using the surge, you are doing 26% more damage in dungeons and 18% more damage in raids, which is a lot. So, that's what we're dealing with. That's what's going on right now. That's a lot of damage that if you're going off surge, you are effectively kind of destroying your damage by using something else, which sucks. Now, let's look at the incoming, which I thought was pretty interesting. So, incoming damage. At a base, we're minus 5, which means we take 32% more damage in raids, and we take 17% more in dungeons. Now, I did not realize this, but we will get to this with the paragraph underneath, but it's also giving us a plus 15 power cap, where in rage, it's a plus 3% more damage, which is literally nothing, and we're actually taking 8% less damage in dungeons. So, between these two, in raids, that's a 30% difference of damage that we're taking. And if we're just at minus 5, taking 32% more damage. If we're at plus 15, we're at plus 3%, which is pretty much a 30% decrease in damage that we're taking. And with dungeons, we were taking 17% more, and then plus the 15, that's 25%. So, let's read what they say underneath. These are numbers specifically for regular combatants, dregs, acolytes, etc. More difficult combatants may scale a bit differently. Raids and dungeons had different settings previously, however, being very similar to each other, they were changed to use the same settings in the final shape to be more consistent. While the outgoing damage is capped at minus 5, in the power-enabled match-made difficulties, standard and advanced, players will continue to increase defensive effectiveness beyond the target power. So what this is saying is, say the raid is 1945 to be at base power, right? That means if you continue to get your power over that, it will help you defensively. If you get 15 power over whatever power they give you in the raid or dungeon, you will take 30% less damage, which is big, which I was not aware of, but that is a pretty big deal. The target power display focuses on offensive output for UI UX reasons. This means that the players will continue to reduce incoming damage up to plus 15 in standard and plus 10 in advanced. In our chart above, you can see that players only take slightly more damage in raids at plus 15. Like I said, only 3%, while they take less damage in dungeons than before the final shape. So before the final shape, we were actually at 0%, right? So now we're actually, if you get 15 over the dungeon cap, you know, whatever the dungeon cap is, then You're literally taking 8% less damage than you were even before this expansion, which is good. With that context in mind, we have been listening to the feedback around how surges have been impacting player build choice, and we're going to make a change. Upcoming changes. We have decided to remove surges from raids and dungeons in next week's update, as well as to adjust tuning so that you'll perform as if you had them across the board. Thank you! This means the damage bonus will now be applied to all subclass damage types, including kinetic, by default. This change will make outgoing damage in dungeons higher and reduce the difference in raids compared to before the final shape. It does so while removing barriers to build crafting. We'll continue to monitor feedback and see how this update plays out for everyone. So, let me give my 2 cents on this. A lot of the controversy on Twitter and Reddit has been talking about now raids are too hard for casuals or new raiders to dip their toes in and to start, playing. As well as them just getting, nuked in these raids. My opinion on this is that I believe that the -5 power cap, I think, is fine. I think that the power cap and surges are different problems, and I'm gonna explain why. The power cap being -5, I think is completely fine, especially that we are confirmed and now it's showing us that if you go over that power cap, you're going to be progressively taking less and less damage up to +15 over the power cap, which is, you're taking 30% less damage. You're gonna not take any damage, right? You could die way less. So just it being -5 as far as outgoing damage goes, and even incoming damage, I still think that's fine. I think raids are probably the most end game you can get in the game. Raids and dungeons. Obviously there's master raids, obviously there's day ones, but I would say just looking at the activity as a whole, strikes, gambit, crucible, raids, dungeons. Raids as an activity is probably the pinnacle in this game. So it being a little bit more difficult, like -5, I think is completely okay. I think people should be working up to raids. I don't think they should be afraid, but if -5 is too hard for some people, I think that they can go and practice in other areas. For instance, people can build up to raids, such as you can do overworld lost sectors, you could do legendary lost sectors, you could do master lost sectors, you can do nightfalls, you can do all the difficulty of nightfalls, you can do strikes. There's a lot of things that players can do to prepare themselves for going into the pinnacle activity in this game. So I think the -5, completely understandable, completely fine. Now, why I'm very happy about everything Bungie just did is because surges suck. Really bad. I'm gonna tell you why. So, surges chokehold you into using certain guns. Now, I see a lot of arguments saying, yeah, it mixes up the meta though. It mixes up what you could use, and you have to think of different strategies on bosses. While that is kind of true, it chokeholding what weapons you can use in a looter shooter, a game that is all about the weapons you obtain and grind for, is bad. For instance, if there is a somewhat meta loadout, let's use Thunderlord because it's, meme gun, right? Say Thunderlord by itself in this current state, say it was off surge, and you're using Thunderlord, you're memeing, you're trolling, right? It's just really not good, right? But if you use it on surge, it's oh, kind of a good gun. Maybe I can use this. Maybe we should use this for this boss, right? It already chokeholds you into thinking like that. On top of that, this doesn't hurt the people that aren't going to have a problem with this. The veteran players, the experienced players, they're going to have all the guns. They could be like, yeah, sure, okay, Surge this week is Arc. Let me use Cloud Strike. Let me use Wendigo, right? It's going to hurt the casual player base and the people that are just getting into raiding, because most likely, they're not going to have all these different kinds of guns. They might not have a Wendigo. They might not have a Crux Termination. They might not have Cloud Strike. So during Arc Surge, not only are they maybe struggling because they're learning a raid, but also they're struggling because they don't have the best guns for that surge, right? So without surges and everything is the same baseline, people can use and should be able to use whatever they want. Yeah, of course, some people can use the meta, right? They can use Still Hunt, they can use Euphony, and that's great. But just because somebody picks an off-meta pick, they're not getting double cucked because it's off surge. They're just doing a less optimal gun. It's like, hey, all I have is Thunderlord, but if everything is exactly the same, let me use my Thunderlord and I'll be okay, right? Like, you're gonna get through the raid. Another thing I'll say is a lot of people were worried about just the damage in general, like especially even like without surges, is that like damage is harder now. Like, you're doing so much less damage, things are taking more phases. Obviously I can see people seeing that, like if they're doing off surge weapons, it's minus 33% damage in raids. Like, that's a big amount. And then if you're using surges, it's only minus 15, which is like a decent amount, but like doable. Now that what they're doing is they are taking away surges, which is great, Bungie. Huge W, Bungie. And so everything is going to be at this minus 15% because everything will be moved up to surge damage, which is great. If you do just okay damage, if you learn an okay rotation, this minus 15% damage compared to before the expansion, it isn't going to make that massive of a difference. You're still going to be able to clear the raid if you're supposed to, right? If you do the mechanics and you do decent enough on damage, you'll be able to clear the raid. You'll be okay. Part of learning raids as a casual or new player, right, is learning how to do damage. Raids have bosses. Raids have mechanics. Raids have things that will try to kill you. Those are 3 things that happen in raid, right? Now we know that you shouldn't be dying because you can keep on getting defensive buffs up to plus 15, right? So that's fine. It's the same from before the expansion, and even better for dungeons since before the expansion. And as for damage, yeah, you lose out on 15% damage from since before the expansion. That's not going to make or break your team. I promise you. It's not. People are, low manning Witness, low manning other bosses, and still either 1-phasing, 2-phasing, right, with optimal loadouts. Even if you use unoptimal, if everyone uses unoptimal, and they, just do an okay amount of damage, and you have 6 people, you're still gonna, as long as you're shooting the thing in the head, you'll kill the boss. Yeah, I think that's about it for the most part. I think this is a really good change. I'm glad Bungie has listened to, online like Reddit and Twitter, which is funny to say because sometimes they don't have the best opinions, but I think that they listened and I think they made the right change to this, because at the end of the day, we want more people playing Destiny, we want more people in raids, and surges is definitely not the way. I don't think -5 is the biggest deal. I don't think minus 15% damage is the biggest deal. I think people will still be okay. People can still learn the raids. People can still Sherpa. I think it's going to be completely okay. But yeah, I think this is a big old W for Bungie. Very happy to see this. Yeah. But I think that's it. Appreciate y'all for watching. It's the first video. I want to make more videos. I want to do more Destiny content. I want to make more content for a bunch of different games. So if you like this video, like, comment, do all that stuff. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See you.